YouTube channel. We are live on all the platforms that are important. So if you're not watching this, you're not on an important platform. You need to change things up. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I think there's all of them. If you're new here, every other week we go over a topic. Last week last time we talked about staging and interior design. This week is kind of one of my love topics, which is just real estate market in general, because you see things in the news. But one of the things you've heard me say repeatedly is there is no such thing as a national real estate market. All markets are local. You can have one market that is extremely up while another one is extremely down and another one is completely sideways. And interestingly enough, that's happening quite a bit today in today's market. There are markets that are definitely down, and there are other markets that are sideways, and there are ones that are up. And we're going to kind of go over what we think is going on, or give you some insight. So the special guest that we have on today is my broker and more recent mentor, Mr. Alan Thompson. So Sean, if you'll bring Mr. Alan on. What's up, Alan?
Hey, what's happening, Dan?
Bringing on Alan for a couple of reasons. One, he's a beast. He's been in the industry for a long time. And just like in race car or driving, just because you've been doing something for a long time does not necessarily mean that you're the best at it. Race car drivers are a good example. You can drive for 60 years and be a shit driver. But Alan has performed at the highest possible level, not just himself, but also helped his wife reach the #1 agent in Hampton Roads within 5 years? I mean, that's pretty ridiculous in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And even more importantly, so by referral, 93% of their business was, hey, you should talk to to Lucky Real Estate, now the agency, but you should talk to the Thompson team. And that goes not only is that big ego boosting in the sense of that just feels good for someone to go, you would be an absolute moron if you didn't use this other person. And so that's how they've built their business. And they are expanding. And I kind of joined, it's sort of like Apple. You're just like, man, I got to get on what's going on here. There's good stuff happening. There's good stuff happening at the agency. And so between Alan and the agency, I kind of went over to this new brokerage, super excited to be there. And hopefully we'll be competing for #1 in the next couple of years. So we'll see what happens, what happens there. But I'm really excited to have you, Alan. Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. Excited to have you be part of the agency, but really excited for everything that's happening. So glad to be here.
Awesome. So every time that we do this, Alan, you said you have your drink over there. We try to do our best to support something local. So and by far local for us, it's Virginia. So we have a Richmond premium moonshine ruby red grapefruit that Sean and I are going to be dipping into. And Alan has inspired me because he's been kicking ass at the gym. So I have not missed a gym session, Alan, in two months, not a single one. And I've been really good about tracking all my calories. So it's not something I enjoy doing, but the benefit of this is I have accounted for these calories. So cheers, good sir. I'm gonna pour myself a little some here, Sean, and there you are, sir. Cheers, Alan. Thanks for coming on. Hank, there we go. Ooh, that's nice. That's dangerous. All right, for those at home, that's what we're looking at. Opposite direction. Belle Isle Ruby Red Grapefruit Premium Moonshine. I'm a huge fan of grapefruit and grapefruit. Well, that's nice and chilled.
Good for hot.
I think what it really needs it needs a little bit of grapefruit juice in it. I think that would really add the citrusiness. There's a word I'm missing out on there. All right. So first and foremost, Alan, I think one of the things I kind of want to hit on, and I've gone over this a couple of times with folks. Sean, can I share my screen, or is it already being shared?
Yeah, we got it.
So, when I'm looking at our analytics system, typically you can bring up in my opinion, two different dashboards. You have your market insights dashboard, which shows you all the way back to 2004. And then you have your weekly, which kind of gives you a little more insight into what happens on more of like the yearly cycle. So we can kind of give a larger view or a macro view and then a micro view. And that's usually how I break it down to clients. And one of the things I really like to go over with clients, especially first-time home buyers or sellers, to kind of get an idea of what's going on in the market, what's happened in the past. The very first thing I'll talk about is is the market that we're in today more aggressive or less aggressive than the market of 2004 to 2007? And actually, what I've found is most people overinflate this market and how aggressive it is. It's not that this run up is not significant by any means, but you can see the year over here and how quickly this run up happened. The other thing that I will press on them is it kind of play this, hey, let me ask you a question, try to get them to get to the insight themselves, is to say, hey, with this type of run up, you have one of two things. Everything in the market is dictated by supply and demand. Everything. Services, the moonshine that we're drinking tonight, everything. And so when you have a run up like this, one of two things has to happen. Either inventory has to be extremely limited with too many people going after the same resource. That's kind of the definition of inflation, right? Or there's so many buyers with the same amount, or some combination of those two. And that's how I like to lead it. And so immediately what I'll do is I'll go over and I'll say, hey, all right, well, we have the data here. We can take a look at what's happening in the active listings. And this always takes. But what was really interesting during this period of time, and I'd love to hear your insight because you lived through this, is that our inventory more than quadrupled during this time.
Yeah.
Which should tell the person, like, their brain should be going, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. How do we have a quadrupling of inventory but pricing doing what it did? And it should tell you how stupid the demand was.
Right.
So why don't you give us a few of your insights of that period of time?
What happened back then is the inventory, everybody decided they were going to sell their house because they could get crazy money for it, because what they were basically doing is the money was free. They were giving money to everybody no matter what. The banks made a decision that the only way they could make money was to give money away. And so they were giving money to everybody that shouldn't have money, no matter what, that shouldn't be qualified. They could go out, you could be making $100,000 a year, and they'd say, oh, we're going to have you qualified for $1 million. And if you wanted to borrow $1 million, they'd find a way to give you $1 million.
Sure. And in some cases, you didn't even have to prove that you actually made it.
You didn't even have to prove you made the $100,000. And so it really was crazy when you looked at it. So what they did is they put so much money into the market that everybody put their house out there on the market. And so the inventory just went through the roof. So it gave people the ability to keep raising the prices, even though there was a huge amount of supply. And so,
yeah, I think at the same time, there was also a ton of new construction going on at the time, right?
Just a ton of new construction. The cities were free and giving out the permits, and the land was there, and people had sat on land for years. The builders had bought land cheaply in the years prior, and all of a sudden, that's when they decided, hey, let's put it out there. And they did.
What's the TV show, Sean, where the family goes under? The money in the banana stand?
The Ozarks?
No, Money in the Banana Stand.
In the banana stand.
The money's in the banana stand, the TV show?
The Arrested Development?
Yeah, Arrested Development. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are TV shows based off of it.
Yeah. So that they said, hey, this is when we're going to do it. And they built everything. So then what happened when basically that caused the financial collapse, was real estate was one of the primary reasons behind it. And when it collapsed and everything came under investigation, well, then all of the rules came into play. And so, and everybody that took, the builders were some of the ones that took the biggest hits because they got caught with all the inventory. And so they've been some of the slowest ones to come back. And so now what's happened is they were the hardest hit. They lost all their crews, they lost all their subs, they lost all everything. They got hit hard. So they were, that's why now we have such a backlog in new construction. So when you look at it, that's one of the reasons we're so far behind now in inventory.
Those builders are real hesitant to put themselves in risky positions. Or even if like I know personally a builder that was building, I've known him since I've moved here about 20 years ago. And one of the things he had told me is he had seen some of his buddies go out of business.
Yeah, there's 40% of the builders just aren't building anymore. One of the builders that I represented on 3 different construction sites is now a restaurateur. He's totally out of construction. He's got some phenomenal restaurants in town, but he is totally out of the construction business. And
Right.
they totally just left the industry. And so it's totally changed the industry, what's out there. So
Go ahead.
that's why now we have such a lack of inventory as part of part of its new construction.
Well, because they don't really have an incentive to over leverage themselves because they take on all the risk.
Right.
And if they end up developing too much, then they can't charge the prices that they want to do. And if they don't sell, it's too risky of a position. And this is kind of one of those catch-22 things. It's like one feeds into the other. And speaking of feeding into the other, I mean, the other thing that we have a big driver going on is these, what's his name? Not Hartman, first name, I forget his name, but Hartman basically calls it the Fed poison pill. Is when we had interest rates below 3.5% for 2 years, I'll have all of that pressure. Now that doesn't guarantee people are going to move. I'm selling houses for people that have interest rates below 3, but they're need to move. They're divorces, they're expanding families, they got orders somewhere else. But all of that pressure of all these buyers that go, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Why would I move?
The optional moves are pretty much off the table right now. You're going to always have a certain percentage of people that have to move. You've got job transfers, you've got military moves, you have life situations, the empty nesters, the divorces, the people that have to move. You've got deaths in the family, you've got people that have to move. Those transfers are going to happen, and those moves are going to happen regardless of interest rates. However, those optional moves are really coming off the table, and they're sitting back. If the sellers are holding those sub-4 interest rates, I'm sitting back there saying, why would I do it?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if you bought 3 or 4 years ago and your move up house at the time, so let's just say you bought a house at $350,000, it's now worth $425 or something in that range. Your move up buy went from, at the time, maybe $550 is now $700, and you have to borrow at 7% interest rates. It's a huge jump in price. One of the things I think I brought this up, Sean, if you'll bring the chart back up here. There's a website called BlackKnightIncorporated.com. I'm not sure you're familiar with them, but there is they put out a report called the Mortgage Monitor. And I bring up this chart often with clients when I'm trying to talk them through what does it mean to pay a mortgage today in comparison to history? Because it's really popular today for TikTok, Instagram to kind of crap all over boomers and say, okay, you bought your house at this interest rate. And I'm like, well, kind of. Right. But we have the data there. We actually have the data to show what people were paying as a percentage of their income during the 1970s and 80s. And in 1981, you can see this blue line right here. The average person in 1981 was paying 55% of their income to buy a house.
Right. Oh, yes.
And so I kind of tease them. I'm like, maybe grandma and grandpa were actually just better managers of their money than you were.
I can remember buying my first house in 1984 with a 12.25% interest rate. It was a VA loan. And I mean, I can remember, paying that mortgage payment, and it was huge. It seemed huge at the time, but it was a huge percentage of my income. And the 12.25% interest rate. And when I sold it, it was an assumable loan, and they assumed my loan because interest rates had gone over 14%. And that 12.25 was a good loan.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Hey, David, good to see you, brother. David Werfel's in the chat.
Hey, David.
So we've got when I look at this chart, what I see here and is a couple different things. One is that payment is incredibly closely tied to interest rates, way more so than the price of homes. Because obviously the price of a home is a factor, but you can see from 1977 all the way to 1999, 2000, it was basically in lockstep. And right around that time is when we started kind of seeing a divorce between the two. But you can still see every time it goes up, it goes up. Every time it goes down, it goes down. But what's fascinating to me is from 2007, right? Because it took about 5 full years for our markets, basically nationwide, but specifically our market to fully correct from the 2006, 2007 debacle. Right around 2011, we actually can see that the average payment to income ratio was the lowest it had been for over 50 years, for over a decade.
Yep.
And so one of the things I try to describe to people is that, like, it's not relatively expensive, because it kind of is, right? When you look at the last 50 years, 33% of your income, it's not nothing. But when you go from the lowest it had been for a decade and ramp it up the fastest that we'd seen interest rates rise since the early or late 70s, the market goes, wait a minute, I'm used to paying that. I don't like this. And you and I and anyone who's an agent have really felt it, probably from, I don't know, but for you, but for me, it was from basically September of last year to February of early this year, where the market said, I don't like this. We're going to put things on pause. There's too much chaos going on in the marketplace. Is that kind of what you?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it definitely came to a pretty quick halt there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think this is a really fascinating chart. I mean, this is, you and I kind of nerd out on these kind of numbers and stuff. And, but at the end of the day, people are buying off of it's pretty, or this, I like it, that type of thing. So let me close that out here. I had the previous one. A couple other things I wanted to kind of bring up on this one is people I've heard multiple times, like, where are the foreclosures? Where are those things coming? And again, these things are tracked. We're not guessing in the dark here. You can see the peak we had right around 2009, 2010 was right here. And every subsequent year, it's tanked. What happened right here? COVID. But what did they do? They basically said, we can't foreclose on you. Yep. Once that was over, right, it tanked back down. And you can see it's still below the national delinquency rate for first lien mortgages, is still at record lows for a very long period of time. Yes. And so I just think when I hear people scream gloom and doom, either on the news or they just are kind of repeating tropes that they've heard, I go, I don't see it.
Yeah,
I just don't see it at all.
There's too much equity sitting out there for there to be the foreclosures like we had before.
Mm-hmm.
Before, yeah, they were loaning too much money. There just wasn't any equity anywhere. There wasn't room for there to be any price drops and have any equity. Now there's way too much equity in the houses.
Sure. I mean, I think in our market, we could probably see a 20% reduction in values, right, and we probably wouldn't see delinquencies rates go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, we have some risk because of the VA loans, but so we have a little bit of risk here that some places don't have, but we still have too much equity.
I would agree. I think for me, the thing that is the unknown factor is the economy doesn't tend, unless a pandemic happens, right, and then it's overnight. But the economy tends to move slowly. It's a slow turning ship, and the unknown for me is unemployment. If unemployment were to skyrocket, it doesn't really matter how low your mortgage rate or your mortgage payment is if you can't make that payment at all. Right. Now, the banks are more likely to work with you than they have basically in history. There are more programs out there. There's a 40-year refi product that's available if you need it. They are very, very much willing to kind of work with you. And so, in my opinion, you could lose your job, see a 15 to 20% reduction in the market, and still probably sell net positive for the majority of the market that's out there. And that's just a very unique place to be.
Yep.
What's up, Sean?
Mr. Andre Ford here as a
cheers guy having a scotch, but isn't real estate a lagging indicator? Wouldn't it be better be later when the crash to come? Yeah. So here, Andre, really good question. And let me kind of pull back up the chart here. So one of the things I talk with clients about is months of supply, because what we were talking about earlier was everything is dictated by supply and demand. Well, this is a supply divided by demand, right? It's basically what's the status of the market almost in perfect like balance. Now, yes, would it still be helpful to look at median days on market? Sure. Is it still helpful to look at what's the average list price to sales price ratio? Sure. But if I'm looking for one indicator to try to understand what's going on, this is what I use. And so for a long period of time, between kind of 5 and 7 has been considered a neutral market, something that doesn't necessarily favor buyers, something that doesn't necessarily favor sellers. Now, on an individual basis, right? And so you can kind of get into the bell curve. Well, Dan, I sold $50,000 above list price in 2007. I'm not saying you didn't. I'm just saying that on the whole, out of all the contracts that happened, it was majority a buyer's market during this period of time. And so what we saw was from 2004 all the way to 2007, you see this shift happening, right? What if and let me do a quick pause here, Andre. I think in some ways it is easy to look back on history and say, I would have chosen differently. I think that there are more people today, both myself and I consider myself a young guy, right? So I'm 39, but there are still people that are 10 years younger than I am that have access to the information and are really studying it. I don't know, Alan, this is where I would be curious of your input. How many people were actually paying attention to this stuff in 2006 and 7?
I was very fortunate in that I sold my large real estate company in September of 06. Mm-hmm. I had a 3-year non-compete. So I stepped out of the real estate industry from 06 to 09. I couldn't sell real estate. And so I was very fortunate in my timing. I tell people I got lucky. It wasn't that I had this crystal ball and I guessed it exactly right. But I was able to work as a consultant during those 3 years. And, so I basically sat back and watched the numbers, but I was looking at it from that 10,000, foot look of and not having the pain of being in it. And sure. I was very fortunate to be able to see it, but nobody could predict what was going to happen at that time. It's just, riding along 4, 5, and 6. There were a few people saying it's going to bust, but the vast majority were just going 100 miles an hour and ride. To tell you
a couple of thoughts I have on that. Like, I don't know if Andre, if you've watched the movie The Big Short. Granted, it's Hollywoodized, but like Michael Burry was like Christian Bale's character, and Christian Bale's character was this like super neurotic. He like would literally open up the mortgage files in the bonds that he was trading and read through them all. But like he was that level of person. And so, I think there are people that really pay attention to these things that probably could be a canary in the coal mine type moments. But what I get when I was saying like it's a slow moving ship, you can see like here's 2005, right? So underneath 6, the closer you get to 0, the stronger and stronger of a seller's market it becomes. And you can see these shifts. And so one of the things you have to be careful of is like what's noise and what's an indicator worth actually paying attention to. So you can see these massive jumps that will happen intra-year, right? What ends up happening actually is these lows are correlated with summers and these highs are correlated with winters, which makes total sense that there's far more competition during the summer. And so the market tends to swing a little bit more in favor of sellers than it does buyers. And it tends to be favoring buyers in the winters. I've told clients for a long period of time, if you're trying to optimize to the nth degree, buy during winter and sell during summer. Like that will make more of an impact on the value of what you get out of your real estate than trying to negotiate a couple of $1,000s on closing costs.
Yep.
Like a huge impact. But here's kind of the point I'm trying to make is here's mid 2005. Here's mid 2006. Here's mid 2007. It took 2 full years to go from a seller's market to a neutral market. Another full year. And this is kind of like, I would go, man, these are some pretty big jumps, but we're also headed here into winter. Here's another big jump. I think right around this late 2006, especially when you saw this jump right here, is when you could probably say, oh, the party's over. This is a pretty big deal. Now, obviously, I don't have news articles correlated exactly with these moments in time, and I'm also have the benefit of hindsight being 2020. But what you can see is these massive swings. So here's where I also see this. So let me go back over here to median sales price to kind of prove my point a little bit. We had this run up, right? We said kind of late 2006. Well, You would have barely called it right before the peak. And how long did it take before it hit the bottom? 5 full years.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I've told clients many times is time in the market will always trump timing of the market. Residential real estate, unless you're a flipper or a big time investor, is not necessarily your best investment. Yet, can you make money on your primary residence? Absolutely. Are there wise things that you can do with it? Absolutely. But you need a place to live. You want to buy something well within your price point that makes financial sense for you and hold on to it for as long as fucking possible. That's what is a good financial decision for you. If you buy and sell real estate on short time periods, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. And that's kind of the basics that I give. The other thing that I think I wanted to kind of transition is when people saying, well, the market was going to crash. Well, they started saying that late last year. And the correction that the news was saying was from the peak, 06 here in 2022, it's already corrected 20%. Yeah, it does every year, you idiot. Mm-hmm. Every single year it does. And so I was like screaming from the rooftops of like these guys who were throwing it out into like the other YouTubers, like the market's crashing. I'm like, it corrects every year. It peaks out in summer and comes down every winter. I don't understand what you're screaming on about. Guess what's going to happen? We're right here. You want to see the peaks? Here's 6, 6, 7, 6, 7, 8, 6, 7. Guess what's going to happen here in the next few months? It's going to come down. And this cycle will continue to happen year after year after year. But the biggest thing that we're up against that you had mentioned previously is active listings. We have an inventory problem, a massive inventory problem, because the balanced market was here in 2013 to kind of 2018. And you can kind of see it getting a little more aggressive every single year. Well, there's March right there of 2020. COVID hit. And when half of the marketplace thinks that it's a hoax and the other one thinks it's at the end of the world, guess what happens? Most of them don't put their houses on the market. And we just haven't recovered from it. Here's what I'm seeing, Alan, and I'd love to get your input on this, is this normal cycle that we see, a low during winter and high during summer, right? I said, I think Sean can verify this, but back in January, I said, hey, if inventories don't rise, we're going to probably see 6, 7, 8, 9% appreciation this year. Yep. And what happened? February, March, April, May, it has not gone up at all. We still have a massive inventory problem, but I'd love to hear some more of your insights on this.
Yeah, that's the whole problem with our market is we just have no inventory at all. It's driven, the buyers have accepted the higher interest rates right now to be the norm, and they may be the norm for a while, and rates may go up a little bit more. They may go down. They may, there is no crystal ball on what's going to happen exactly in the economy and what the Fed's going to do. They're probably going to go up a little bit. Anytime there's an election coming up, it gets affected some. But typically the current administration tries to put their thumb on it a little bit to look good. We have the current sellers, like we talked about, have not accepted the optional moves, have not accepted the interest rates. They're holding what they have. And because of that, that's what they're sitting on their houses. And the builders, if we look at it, they are years behind building the amount of inventory we need for the next generation coming along, the next 2 generations coming along. They are years behind the inventory needed. So we have
I don't see it changing anytime soon.
I think we're going to have an inventory problem for 6 to 8 years. I mean, I really.
It could be even longer. One of the things that we see. So the problem with the Fed and what they're doing is they are only trying to change. I'll answer that question here in a second, Sean. They're only trying to change one side of the equation, which is demand. And I remember saying last year, it wouldn't surprise me if the federal government comes out with some first-time home buyer program, some equity-based down payment assistance program. And we could argue, anyone can argue the pros and cons of that, whatever. But all you're doing is you're taking people who cannot afford a house to now affording a house.
Mhm.
And what that does is it increases demand. When you increase demand, what does that do to prices? It makes them go up.
Yep.
The only long-term viable solution is for the federal government to work with local governments to try to open up dilapidated homes, government-owned properties, loosen zoning regulations and building regulations, provide incentives to help builders build affordable homes. That is really the only way to truly solve this problem. But it's sort of like elections. It's much easier just to stroke a pen and say, hey, look, we're giving free money away than it is to actually try to solve systemic problems. So I just don't see it going away. The other one I think I've seen is like, well, what if we made 40-year or 50-year loan products available? Same problem. You take a whole bunch of people.
I think what we need to do is I think we need to make transferable mortgages. I think we need to let the people that have the 2, 3, 4% mortgages transfer that amount of mortgage onto their new mortgage at the existing mortgage rate with that bank. They'd keep the same bank. The bank would keep that mortgage, and whatever the increase is, they'd get the new mortgage at that rate.
So incentivize basically lenders to provide a second,
and that way they'd keep the money. They'd keep their client.
Yeah.
And that way,
I think
the sellers might be more active to put their house on the market.
I agree. I think the other one I would like to see is some type of working around with people who've bought in the last 3 years, who might still actually move, but they're like, man, Dan, I don't know. I'd have to also pay taxes on all of this, provide some types of tax relief on those funds. I think that would go a long way as well.
Right. So, I mean, I think there's things we could do to get some of that inventory to come on, but got to get creative, step out of the box.
All right. In the last 3 years, we've had 9, 8, and 9 appreciation in tax values. That part sucks. Well, yeah. I mean, if you're gonna reap the benefit of your home values going up, it's funny. People don't tend to complain on their taxes when it's undervalued, but they really get frustrated when it's overvalued. You can appeal those. If you feel like they've overvalued you, there's an appeal process. You can go through your city and they'll send somebody out to the property and try to do a proper evaluation. Other people try to do the opposite. They'll try to do improvements and do their best not to pull permits so that the house is nicer, but they're not paying higher taxes on it. But yeah, the reality is that if you've bought your house in benefited from the appreciation, but not necessarily sold on it, your property taxes are going up. The other thing to pay attention to for people who are looking at buying is if you're buying a house that has been renovated, make sure that you prepare yourself for the increased taxes for the reevaluation of value from the city, because the taxes may be based on the dilapidated position. Right. Is Betsy over there winking at you in the background?
Yes, she is.
Betsy, you want to come into frame real quick?
No, she's not going to.
Well, cheers to Betsy. Thanks, Betsy, for letting us have your husband this evening. All right. Is there anything market-wise that you wanted to go over that I have not covered?
No, I mean, you hit it a lot. I mean, and the biggest thing is, like I say, I think we're going to have a lack of inventory for years to come. And that is the unique situation. That's why prices are still going up, even though the number of transactions are down. It's a tough market. We have, we have more agents than we should. We probably have 30 to 50% more realtors, more real estate agents in the marketplace than we should have based on the number of transactions that are taking place. It's crazy out there right now.
Yeah. Andre asked this question, Alan, is get your input. Do you think the government if they didn't pass the non-foreclosure bill, the market wouldn't be this way? I don't think so.
If they hadn't passed it, we would have had some foreclosures come into the market during COVID, for sure.
Here's the real question, Alan. How many of your clients and Betsy's clients called you and said, hey, can I not pay my mortgage for 12 months and put that into a CD and then, get caught up on it?
Very few, actually. We had very few do that. Probably
I had over a dozen.
Well,
they're like, hey, Dan.
I don't think we had that many. We had a couple.
Yeah. I had a couple of people where their mortgages were like $3,000, $4,000. And they're like, wait a minute. They're saying I don't have to pay for a year and there's no repercussions. I'm putting that shit in a CD and I'm going to cash out at the end of the year.
We had a couple call us.
Yeah. I don't think so, Andre. I think in general,
Yeah.
That was a knee-jerk reaction by the government to look good. But it also probably served some families who really did need it.
Right. There was some in there.
Because
There were a lot of jobs lost. So
yeah, take the service industry, retail industry. If those people owned homes, you were sent home,
yeah.
and you may or may not have been in a position where your unemployment check covered what it needed to cover. A lot of those people were put in really rough positions. Small business owners are another good example who, until some of the PPP money came in, were paying people out of pocket and really eating up margins. I know 3 business owners that went out of business during that period of time because
multiple small business owners that went out of business.
And the people that I know were trying their best to take care of their people and make sure that they could eat. So yeah, I don't think it would make the impact that maybe you're speculating on there, Andre. I don't see it. All right.
A lot of them would have put their house. I don't think there would have been as many foreclosures. I think some of them put their houses on the market because they had the equity.
Sure. I'll kind of end on this, Alan, because I'd love to hear some more of your thoughts on this. You said in the industry since you were 26. What of today's market do you see and you go, there's nothing really new here. Like, this isn't that complicated, and give advice on that. And then what would you say is, I've never seen this before, and I'm not sure how to interpret this.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, this year makes 35 years for me. So I've done this a long time. The market's always gone up and down, and there's always houses sold. There's always the people that need to buy and sell houses. But what is new is the government's reaction is they're taking actions that with the interest rates and trying to level out inflation. The interest rates went up faster than I've ever seen them up. That short window, how fast rates went up, I've never seen them go up that fast in that short period of time. And so the Fed raised rates faster than I've ever seen them. So that was big. So prices still going up as much as they have been, and no inventory. On the lack of inventory is different right now. The number of transactions going down and the lack of inventory is totally different than we've seen. Like I said before, when prices were going up, there were a lot of transactions happening. Typically before, when the inventory was all over the market, there weren't enough transactions. So I mean, it's going the opposite of, a lot of things are going opposite of what standard economic theory is, and so it's crazy right now. It's a little bit different than we've seen before.
Well, I saw an article speculating that they're thinking, everybody's doing this. They're like, where are rates going? Where are rates going? Where are rates going? And we talk about this on a weekly basis in the office.
Yes.
One of the sayings that's out there, and I'd be curious, marry the house, date the rate type thing.
I knew that was coming.
It's, I think that advice, I don't like it fully, if I'm honest, because it assumes that within a short period of time that you're going to be able to refi, and we just don't know that.
We really don't. It's what happened. It's okay if you can afford it where it is, and it's okay if you're saying, "Hey, I got to have a place to live." If you got to have a place to live, hey, jump in. I think it is better than paying rent. Okay, you're going to build some equity no matter what. And unlike, if I go buy stock in McDonald's, I don't get to go eat McDonald's free. I don't get to go. If I buy stock in things, I got to have a place to live, and so I'm going to invest in housing. I believe in investing in real estate. I need a place to live. So I absolutely, if you're a first-time buyer or you don't own, I believe in investing in your residence. I think that's the right thing to do. However, if you're looking at things, don't over-invest thinking you're automatically going to be able to refi. I don't think that, don't.
I think you can get yourself in some trouble, especially if you're stretching the margins real thin.
Right. Don't be house poor. go below your means a little bit, knowing this is not my forever house.
All right. We'll end on this. Alan, give us a wild real estate story. You've been in the industry for a long time.
Gosh.
You got tons of them out there. Let's hear one.
A wild real estate story. Oh my gosh. About agents or about
anything you want. Anything you want.
Well, I was in the military before, and and then I was in the military during. I was in the reserves, got activated 4 times, and so I've been in 4 combat zones and everything. But I thought I was going to get killed in real estate one time. I was trying to help out a client, and she was actually a military officer, and she was moving down, and she was coming from Maryland, and she was coming down. I'd sold her house, and she was moving in the next weekend, and she called me and she says, "Hey, if I come down, can I drive down this weekend? I'm moving in, single female officer." She goes, "I want to measure the windows so that I can get blinds before I move in. So when I come move in, I can put blinds up so I have the windows covered." And I said, "Hey, I got an open house that day. I'll measure them. You don't have to drive down here from Maryland. I'll measure the windows after the open house and send you the measurements." So I call the listing agent and I say, "Hey, we're closing this week. I've got an open house Sunday. Can I go in and measure the windows after the open house?" And she says, "Sure." Well, the seller had a few things in the house still. They'd been coming back and forth, but they'd moved out, but they'd kept a few things in the house. Well, the listing agent didn't tell the seller that I was going to go in and measure the windows. Well, it's the last weekend before closing. So the seller doesn't tell the agent he's coming down. Then the agent didn't tell him. So I go into must have been the winter because it was dark. So after my open house, I must have done a few things. And I've got to go measure the windows. So I go to the house, use the lockbox, go in the house, turn on the lights. I'm in there measuring the windows. I'm standing up, measuring all the windows. The next thing I know, the seller comes, must have seen the windows, sees somebody in the house. He must have had, a few clothes, a chair, folded up, a few things in the house. He comes in, lock and loaded, pulls a gun on me. I'd never met him. He puts me down on the ground, gun loaded, has me on the ground, threatening me. I'm trying to tell him who I am. I'm the realtor and everything. Lock and loads, puts me on the ground, finally convince him to let me up and tell him who I am. And he finally puts the pistol down. But I thought I was going to die in a house measuring windows.
Alan, I thought real estate was easy.
I've had it happen one other time too. A gun pulled on me like that in real estate. But so there's a crazy real estate story.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for coming on and gracing us with your presence and spending the last 45 minutes with us. I really appreciate it, truly. And maybe we'll bring you back on maybe towards the winter, and we'll kind of speculate what's going to happen in 2024.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Cheers to you.
Cheers, brother.
Have a good one.
All right. See ya.